Today, our chief forensic scientist, Gordon Moonstone, is going to be looking at some of the evidence that was collected at the scene of the murder of Professor Barkington.
We're now going to have a look at the soil that was collected near the footprint that was found in one of the testing fields at the professor's laboratories. This should allow us to see if there are any matches between this and the soil that we collected from the suspect's shoes. Now, this is the one that was collected from the scene of the crime. What we need to do, obviously, is to add some water to this to dissolve anything that might dissolve. We then need to filter out the solid material, and then we're going to do some simple chemical tests on the solution that is left behind. Now, we know for a fact that the professor was using a copper compound in that field, and hopefully we should be able to pick this up in the test that we carry out and see whether we get any matches with the suspects. First, we add a known volume of water to the soil sample. This allows us to dissolve the soluble contents in the soil. This is then shaken to speed up the dissolving process, and then we filter the solution in order to remove any insoluble components of the soil using a funnel and filter paper. The solid material remains behind and is called a residue, and the liquid part that passes through the filter paper is referred to as the filtrate. Now, if we look closely, we can see a pale blue colour in the filtrate solution, which would be consistent with it containing copper compounds in the field. Now, this becomes even more apparent if we hold the sample against a white background, and then the colour is very obvious. Now, the final proof that we need is to compare the suspect samples with the scene of crime sample. And to do this, we're going to add some sodium hydroxide solution to each of these samples. And if there is copper compounds present, what we get is a blue solid forming, or more correctly termed a blue precipitate. Now, if we try this with the suspect samples, we find that sample 1 does have the blue precipitate, sample 2 doesn't, sample 3 does, and sample 4 doesn't. So suspects 1 and 3 have been in that field. I'm now going to examine the fingerprints that were found on the back of the envelope which the blackmail note was sent to Professor Barkington in. I'm going to be wearing some gloves, obviously, so that I don't put my own fingerprints all over it as well. Now, the envelope was torn in half and found in the professor's recycling bin. This is the half that contains the thumbprints that we would like to look at in more detail. Some of them are only partial prints, some of shoes, but we have some full ones on the edge of the envelope there, which will be better when we've actually sealed the envelope back up again. No postal information on there, so we don't know when this was actually sent. On the reverse, as I said, if we seal the envelope up carefully, we will be able to match up the two halves of those prints together, trying not to damage any of the detail that is present there. Now, these fingerprints and thumbprints seem to be made from some sort of sooty material, indicating that the person sealing up the envelope had dirty hands at the time. And you can see there's a fair bit of information there, although possibly the bit we would be most interested in seeing in detail is a little smudged. Yeah, we can see there's a lot less detail in this one. So this is the thumbprint that we're going to be concentrating on to try and match up with our suspects. And here is a little more detail. Now, comparing it to our suspects, we can see that 3 of the suspects there have the same swirling pattern in the middle, and 1 has a loop. So it is highly unlikely that it is suspect number 2 that has sealed up this envelope. For the others, the bit that we are interested in the centre there on the envelope is a little blurred, and it's not very easy to see the detail. In the next analysis section, we will look at the ink that was collected from the Belloc mail note, and also at the fibres that were collected from the clothes of both Professor Barkington and the suspects in this case.
You'll be able to see the results of those tests in Part 7. However, next time we shall be looking at the interviews that were conducted with another of our suspects, Lady Ethel Slugpitt. So until next time, good night. Take care of yourselves.